Good evening, everyone. My name is Brenton McGee, and I am the Performing Arts Associate here at Friends Home in Kennett. And it's my joy tonight to welcome another wonderful composer here for our Meet the Musician lecture series. And her name is Alexis Renee Ward, wonderful composer. And this is her bio. Alexis Renee Ward is an award-winning composer, arranger, conductor, singer, music educator, and accompanist. Her teaching and directing experience runs the gamut of ages and experience levels in both vocal and instrumental fields. For over 15 years, Alexis has worked extensively in sacred music and the nonprofit sector, conducting amateur to professional level community choirs and orchestras, church choirs, children's choirs, handbells, praise bands, folk ensembles, theater troupes, and chamber groups. Additionally, she has been honored to serve as a board member for several ensembles and nonprofit organizations. She received both her Bachelor of Music degree in Composition and Music Theory, as well as her Master of Music degree in Choral Conducting at the University of Delaware, and is currently completing the requirements for her master's in composition. In addition, Alexis has performed, studied, and worked with world-renowned composers and conductors, including David Lang, Eric Watson, Gary Graydon, Anton Armstrong, James Jordan, Weston Noble, Dennis Schrock, Bruce Chamberlain, Charles Bruffy, Giselle Wires, and many, many more. And an avid performer, Alexis has performed with a wide variety of musical groups throughout the years, touring across North America, Asia, and Europe. She has most recently sung with the master singers of Wilmington, Coro Allegro, the Cathedral Choir School of Delaware, and the Meridian Chorale of Atlanta. She currently serves as the director of music at Trinity Presbyterian Church in Delaware, artistic director of the Chester River Chorale, assistant director of Concordia Choral Arts, and creator, co-founder of the Sonus School of Music. She resides in North Delaware with her husband, Thomas, daughter, Hazel, and one daughter on the way, I think in April.
Yes.
On a personal note, I was privileged to work with Alexis on a brand new piece, which is the focus on tonight's lecture. And we're actually doing I'm singing another piece with choir school called from another cantata called Tu Lumen, which is a wonderful piece. A couple months ago, we had Ryan Pryslack, who was the director, and he talked a little bit about Advent music. But tonight we get to have Alexis with us live, and it's a privilege. I love her music. It's really gorgeous. I hope you enjoy it. And without further ado, here's Alexis Renee Ward. Give her a hand.
Well, thank you so much, Brent. I really appreciate you bringing me on tonight. And it's wonderful to kind of meet everybody on the other side as best we can virtually. It's great that we have this method of communicating, which I love. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's always weird hearing your own bio read. I actually had a colleague who works in music management, and she was gracious enough to write that up for me. So not great at kind of listing my own interests and work experience. So she did a wonderful job with that. But yeah, thank you for having me on tonight.
Thank you, Alexis. So tonight's focus is on this commission piece that you did for the Presbyterian Church of the Covenant in Wilmington, Delaware. Talk to me about the process of how you got, commissioned for this piece. What was the ideas that you and Ryan talked about, and just expand upon that. What was kind of the ideas?
Sure. Yeah. Honestly, most of my compositions are choral. It's mostly for a cappella choirs. And I have done a slew of fully orchestrated choral orchestral pieces, a few cantatas and things like that. But recently I've really been trying to write a lot more instrumental music. And I've known Ryan for a long time. We actually both share the same alma mater. We just missed each other as far as graduating classes. So we weren't there at the same time, but we kind of have worked together here and there. And of course, Ryan and the Presbyterian Church of the Covenant, they're champions of new music. And so he very graciously contacted me about composing this piece. He had a very clear vision about what it was that he wanted for the service. And he was able to kind of walk me through what he kind of imagined for that evening. I was excited because Advent is one of my favorite seasons of all time in the church calendar year. So I was excited about the texts that he had chosen. He was very specific about the words that he wanted for the entire piece and how he wanted it to flow. We went back and forth a little bit on the specific instrumentation. And I think we eventually settled on something that worked really well. One, for his vision, and two, just for the mood that the season and the text really kind of require. And so then it kind of was a race to the finish as we kind of got it all wrapped up and written. And I'm sure, I have to say, Ryan was very, very gracious and very patient as I kind of made it right up to that deadline and right past that deadline. But it all came together, and I think it went brilliantly. So definitely much thanks to Ryan and the Presbyterian Church. They really are great supporters.
Yeah, Ryan is such a great guy. And he asked me in the summer, hey, I've got this new Advent piece that this composer, this Alexis Ward, and I didn't know, I heard your name, but I didn't know you personally. And I said, sure, I like new music as well. But then when I saw the score and said, it's like, this is really something. And of course, Advent is such a special time. We did this at Covenant this past December, and talk about like the experience of that performance. We're going to hear it in a little bit, hopefully on YouTube, and talk about kind of the experience and why you love Advent music.
No, those are great questions. I'll work my way backwards. I love Advent just because, one, the themes that are kind of pervasive throughout that season are ones of mystery. I don't want to say magic, of course, right? But in a way, it is kind of a magical time. It's a great time of anticipation. It's leading up to the great event, right, which is Christmas or Christ's birth. And a lot of the texts that have been written for that season, I don't think many of them have been set as much as texts for Christmas and Easter and some of the more high holy days that are more common. So you kind of have a lot more freedom. It's difficult to set texts that are very common because, of course, you have versions of those pieces just echoing throughout your ears. But a lot of these more obscure Advent texts, like the Phos Hilaron, were just a joy to kind of explore and get to know and set. And I've already forgotten the rest of your questions, although they were all really good.
Great. Well, just the Advent experience that day. What was it like performing that piece that night?
Yes. Well, honestly, I of course, as every composer is, I think, when a new work is being premiered, I was a little nervous. You never know how something brand new and fresh is going to be received. And certainly I was anxious for reactions, not only from the audience, but from the performers as well. I wanted to see how it would sit in the voice, or how these parts would sit in the hands of the instrumentalists. And I was pleased that everybody seemed to take to the piece rather smoothly, very easily. Certainly, we were really pressed for time. I know we didn't have a ton of rehearsal leading up to the great premiere. So I know there was certainly a little bit of nervousness there, but just absolute joy when the piece was pulled off. I couldn't have been happier with the performance. I think it went very, very well. And the space at Presbyterian Church of the Covenant is just so beautiful, both visually and acoustically. And so that was really nice, just kind of finally hearing the piece come to light with great performers in a beautiful space. We were able to get some really great recordings of that performance, which was just wonderful. So it was a joy, honestly.
That's really great. I know for me, I only had like 2 rehearsals and then the dress rehearsal. So basically, a lot of us, we had to learn it on our own. It wasn't like an every week church rehearsal. Okay, this is the cantata we're doing, and we got 3 months to prepare. We only had 2 rehearsals, and then that's it. And a lot of times in the professional music world, I mean, there's a difference between the volunteer music world where we're both choir directors. I mean, it takes time, to get some volunteers. But in the professional world, like we were, sometimes you only get 1 or 2 rehearsals, and that's it.
Yeah,
great.
I don't think we had every performer together in one room until the night it was premiered, which of course, as you say,
it just worked. It worked. Right. I mean, we came together, both of our choirs, and we're like, here we go, and it worked.
Well, and as really you say, that's really not unheard of in the professional music world. That just is kind of how it is, and particularly, it being the time of COVID. I mean, many of us hadn't even really performed a great deal before that evening. I know we've kind of been doing the best we can the past 2 years, but I certainly hadn't done something to that scale in a while, just because of COVID. So, premiere aside, even just getting a group of professional musicians together to create something, that substantial was just wonderful. It was a great experience. And you, by the way, I have to say, you did your solo beautifully. You did very, very, it was just beautifully, beautifully done.
Thank you, Alexis. And that leads, so there's 7 movements, and we're going to talk about all 7. And that leads to the first movement, where I did have the privilege of singing. So it was gorgeous. It was a privilege to sing your music, Alexis. So it's a matin, like a responsory. Okay, so talk about maybe for people that aren't familiar with what that is, and then talk about kind of what was the characteristics about what led you to write the way you did, and then we'll listen to it.
Sure. Yeah, I know that when Ryan presented these specific texts to me, the Matin responsorial and the Vesper responsorial, he let me know that the piece would be bookended by both of these a cappella movements. He sent me, there's a very famous Palestrina setting of these texts that's really not dissimilar to the ones that I composed for this evening. I think he wanted kind of those echoes of this older style of sacred music. So there are elements of chant, of course, in the cantor parts. And even in the responses, they're very kind of muted and soft. Nothing really big happens in these movements. They're supposed to be contemplative. They're sort of supposed to set the mood of the evening. And even before I had set these pieces, Ryan kind of painted the scene. He wanted it to be dark. He wanted the choir to process via candlelight. And so even just with that physical, the image of the physical surroundings of the choir, a lot of that really influenced the sound and the pacing of the movements themselves. Well,
great. Let's take a listen. I'm going to make you the host, Alexis, and then you can share your screen, and let's listen to this first movement of your brand new Advent piece, and it's going to be really good. So I'm excited. So.
Israel, thou that leadest Joseph like a sheep. Stir up thy strength, O Lord, and come. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Ghost.
Gorgeous. Love it. I mean, there's an orchestra to it, but this is a cappella, and it's very, I was telling the residents that we were behind the cameras. They were saying, "Where's the choir?" And we were behind at that moment, and that's what you guys wanted, and that it's just been great. Really gorgeous, and it was a privilege to be one of your cantors singing that.
Beautifully.
Thank you, Alexis. The second movement. So this one is so much different than the first. This is actually one of my favorites that you wrote. So Hail, Gladdening Light.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll see, and I don't want to spoil it all for but you'll see it's much different in contrast to the music. It's forte, mostly. It's in a 6/8 meter, and there is hand chimes, hand bells, and then an orchestra with the choir. So it's really cool. Talk to me about like the text and the setting and what your idea was for this movement, the second movement.
Yeah, I think with this one, this was really the text, really the only moment in the entire piece where we kind of had that opportunity to make it big. It was kind of a go big or go home kind of text. The text is Hail, gladdening light, of his pure glory poured, who is the immortal Father, heavenly blessed, holiest of holies, Jesus Christ our Lord. It's very proclamatory. The text deals a lot with light and the glory of God. And as I mentioned before, really Ryan's vision for the flow of this piece, we would start in darkness. We would sing, O come, Emmanuel, as the choir, processed to the front. And then the lights would come on and this movement would just light up the rest of the room with a giant sound. And so I got to have a lot of fun with this one, particularly with the handbells and the rest of the percussion. This is kind of the biggest that those instruments get to be. So this was a fun one to write for sure.
One thing on this one, could you tell me what the specific orchestra was? Because I don't have that on me. What was like which was the instruments for this?
Yeah. The instrumentation we eventually settled on. it was interesting. In the beginning, we had talked about having harp throughout the piece, which would have been gorgeous. That Ryan had specifically requested harp. And sort of as I was getting to know the text more, and as I was starting to set some of these movements, I just thought, oh man, that's a tricky one for me with this text. And particularly with this movement, because I knew that a lot of the percussion and the strings and the woodwinds might actually drown out the harp a little bit, which I didn't want. The final instrumentation that we settled on was for strings. So we have violin, viola, and cello. We also have a clarinetist, an oboist, and then we have a handbell choir, a series of percussion. We have some vibraphone, bass drum, tom-toms, and I think later in the movement, you'll see some organ here and there that was kind of in the place of some of the percussion, but we can get to that later. But yes, that was the instrumentation for this.
Excellent. Let's listen to Hail Gladdening Light.
Lord.
Great, great. So yes, it's so much different than the previous piece. It's gorgeous, but it has some like a cappella sections, and it's gorgeous. I mean, is there anything else you want to say about the Hail Gladdening Light?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a challenging one. And you can even see as you're looking how we're laid out, Ryan kind of had to be there to guide the bells. There's a big kind of pillar there. And we're all kind of squeezed into the space. Visually it was kind of hard to see each other. So it definitely took some extra coordination. But I think it all came across really well. We had a wonderful soprano soloist, Danielle Gover, whose voice just soared exactly as it was supposed to. She did a great job.
Gorgeous voice, yeah. So great. So the third movement is Let My Prayer Arise. Now there's congregation singing in this one, as far as I remember. So talk to me about the third movement, Let My Prayer Arise.
Yeah, with Let My Prayer Arise, that was really just meant to kind of be a congregational psalm setting, if you will. So it was supposed to be participatory. And of course, because of that, it had to be somewhat simple, very accessible, because of course the congregation basically hears it once. And then to participate, they gotta jump right in. So it's very repetitive. That main refrain comes back many times. But there are moments for the choir to shine as well in between those refrains, which I think worked really nicely that night. But yeah, it's definitely one of the more simpler movements.
Yes, absolutely. Let's take a listen. Yes, that's it. And that's based on Psalm 141 in the Bible. So that's really great, Alexis. Anything else on that piece?
I couldn't see you in there.
I was in there. Anything
Yeah.
else, Alexis?
Right there in the back. Yep.
Where's
yeah.
Brenton? Where's our performing arts? I said, I'm right there. I pointed it out.
Well, and this performance was also pretty challenging because we're all, of course, masked. And singing in masks has its own challenges, particularly with breathing and projecting and enunciating. All those things become more difficult, of course, when you're wearing a mask, but we made it through. I love writing in minor. So that was fun to be able to do that. And really Advent and Lent are some of those only seasons where you can really get away with that. So that was fun.
Very good. Very good. All right. Magnificat. Oh, this is another gorgeous one. Movement 4. And there's a lot of settings of Magnificat, but what was the setting like for this Magnificat compared to other composers? And what was the compositional output, and what was the creative idea on this one? Because this one's a pretty complex number dynamically and rhythmically. There's a lot of meter changes. So talk to me about the setting of this Magnificat.
This is probably honestly the movement I had the most anxiety about as I was writing it. I think one, because it's a lot of text to get through. It is not a short text. The other intimidating thing about it is it has been set so many times by some pretty prolific composers. And so just the pressure there. Also, I've been singing in Episcopal churches for forever. And I've sung and know very well a lot of these very famous settings, and getting those kind of out of your ear just so that you can write something new and fresh. There's a lot of pressure there. But as you mentioned at the beginning of the interview, I'm expecting my second baby in April. And it occurred to me that all of these famous settings that I know of the Magnificat were written by men. And of course, the text of the Magnificat is the words of Mary. She's just found out that she's with child. I imagine she's probably very confused and frightened. She's probably feeling a great deal of things that I would imagine, would be a bit difficult for a man to understand what it's like when you find out that you're pregnant, that you're responsible for, another human life that is growing inside you. Of course, Mary's situation was even especially unique because, of course, she's carrying the Savior, the Messiah. So there's some mystery there, the virgin birth. But of course, I kind of wanted to just capture this mystery and vulnerability of what it's like for all women to kind of go through the realization of, oh my gosh, my life just changed. And so, all of the settings that I do know of Magnificat, many of them are very triumphant and, very bombastic. And I'm thinking, I don't know that most women actually feel that way. I'm sure she was, eventually elated, but I imagine this was, a really, really complex emotional time for Mary. And so I tried to capture that best I could with some reflection of my own feelings being pregnant at the time. I'm not sure. I haven't been able to find this to date, but I don't know that a pregnant woman has ever set the Magnificat text. So I may possibly be the first. So that was kind of an exciting part of this journey, I think.
That's a really interesting take on that. I've never heard that on a Magnificat before, but that is true. I don't know if I can't think of anybody.
They say June 1st.
When's the baby due?
Is that what it was?
I think they're asking when's the baby due.
It's a girl, and she should be here on April 4th.
April 4th.
Yeah.
All right. Great. Well, you do get some loud moments, and I'm looking at the score here, and there's loud moments, but it is more reserved. It's not bombastic at all.
And there's a mix, kind of.
It's a mix. Yeah.
Yeah, because I imagine she probably was, going through all sorts of emotions all at the same time. And you can kind of hear that I hope, in the piece. It travels a lot from emotional place to emotional place.
Yeah. All right, let's take a listen to your Magnificat.
Sure.
All right. Woo. Good. That's great. I love that setting
Thank you.
because I can tell that you're really following the text, like even like the harshness, and then it lightens up. I think the harshness, I mean, I want to hear your perspective on that one as far as like the text is concerned. Was it like, clearly I think it was text driven, but like what made it like so powerful and very tense, dissonant, and then it resolves itself? And then of course the Gloria Patri section. What made it, what was your process through that?
Sure. Yeah. Honestly, one of the most challenging things for me as a choral composer is writing instrumental music, because of course in instrumental music there is no text. Being that most of my compositions are choral, everything that I do is really strongly influenced by the words that we're trying to communicate. And particularly in the Magnificat text, when you're singing it in English, that middle section, he's scattered the proud in the imagination of their hearts. There are a lot of really harsh consonants, like the T's and the D's, and even what we're saying is very harsh, right? We're saying that God has put down the mighty from their seats. He is but then the contrast, but he has exalted the humble and meek. And so, of course, I think in order to kind of set that text properly, one, you want to take advantage of the really harsh consonants during the really harsh line of text. And so you can even hear it in the music. It gets very dissonant and very rhythmic. And there's a lot of things kind of happening at once. It's almost a small moment of chaos, right? And then it needs to relax and make way for the contrasting text, right? He has exalted the humble and meek, because of course at that point the text is speaking about someone else. And so I have to say, when I set this back in the fall, usually what I'll do whenever I write a piece with text is I'll write out by hand the text over and over and over, just kind of getting it into my own hands and my mind. And I'll speak it aloud many times before I actually set it to a melody. And I remember kind of circling that middle section, kind of worried about, oh gosh, it's so harsh and it's so contrasting to the beginning, which is just Mary finding out that she's with child and she's carrying Messiah, and she's trying. You can hear in the words, it's almost as if she's trying to be optimistic about it. But of course, this is a very heavily weighted thing. And it comes with a deep history and a lot of suffering of the Jewish people. And you can't just kind of ignore that. It's all a part of the story. So there was a whole lot to capture in a short amount of time. And I think that's kind of why it kind of just visits a lot of places emotionally very quickly.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's really gorgeous, that Magnificat setting, really great. So the next setting, and it always comes usually after the Magnificat, is the Nunc Dimittis. So talk to me about the fifth movement, this Nunc Dimittis setting. Yeah,
this one I really enjoyed writing, honestly. This one came a lot easier than the Magnificat for me. I knew that I wanted to revisit, of course, both the Magnificat and the Nunc Dimittis end with the same exact text, which is the Gloria Patri, or the Glory be to the Father. And so I knew that I wanted both movements to contain kind of the same text and the same music. But in the Nunc Dimittis, the Gloria Patri is much bigger. So in a way, as you're listening to the Magnificat and it gets to that kind of final section, it's a satisfying ending, but it is perhaps not as big as it could be, because of course we're waiting for the Nunc Dimittis. And of course, these words are actually the words from the Song of Simeon. He, of course, has waited his whole life for Messiah. And now he's an old man, and God had promised him that he, in his lifetime, would see the coming of Messiah. And so for him, I think his reaction is one of relief. He's been waiting a really, really long time for this. And so for his promise to be fulfilled, there's joy in that. But there's a sense of course, relief. There's also still that element of mystery because, of course, all of this is still just very mysterious. And the story is kind of still just starting. And the text itself, I think, there's a pervasive theme throughout this that, of course, throughout this story, it's bringing glory back to God, right? And Simeon's words are very much grateful and thankful. He's realizing what the coming of the Messiah means for his people and what that is ultimately going to bring. It's a fulfillment of a promise. So with this movement, I think it's again, it was just a lot more fun to write. And I think the end is very satisfying once we can finally kind of have the Gloria Patri in all its glory.
Great. All right, let's take a listen to this movement. Great. Awesome. All right. So we come to the sixth movement. Verate Celli. So talk to me about this movement here.
Yes. This is actually the only movement that is in Latin. When Ryan and I were originally talking about this piece, he was very clear that he wanted it to be in English, and I completely understood his reasons for that. But as I was kind of setting this movement, particularly for kind of the style and some of the colors that I was going for, I just kept thinking to myself, it would be really neat if this was in Latin. There is a soprano solo throughout this movement, where she's singing in kind of a very chant-like style. And the thing with the English language is it can tend to be a little clunky, and it can kind of interrupt that, otherwise really just smooth, ethereal kind of sound that I was going for. And so I kind of got on handed knee and begged Ryan if he would consider if we could do this movement in Latin. And I'm so happy that he allowed that, because I think it comes across really well in the Latin language. The translation is drop down ye heavens from above and let the skies pour down righteousness. Let the earth open and let it bring forth the Savior. It's just, the text itself is very, very beautiful, and the imagery is very much there, which, made it very easy to set as a composer, because the text really just kind of paints the picture for you. And of course, the Gloria Patri also comes back in this one. I did decide to change it musically for this one. We had considered making the Gloria Patri the same in every movement, but just with the really contrasting character of this movement, we thought it would be better to be a little different. Ryan also had asked if we could include a really unique instrument for this movement, and that was tuned water glasses, which have a really neat sound. But this is sort of the nature of putting this together as quickly as we could. He wasn't able to have the tuned water glasses happen for this performance. So very graciously, we were able to kind of pull an organist in last minute, and she plays the tuned water glass parts on the organ. I think it actually turned out really nicely. It still worked, but there's some really vulnerable moments, I think, in this movement. There's also a lot of the text itself is really kind of a representation of the Jewish people begging for deliverance. They're eagerly awaiting a Messiah, and so there's kind of this sense of yearning and desperation and pleading, and so you can kind of feel that tension and release kind of all throughout the piece until it finally just very softly fades away with that tuned water glass kind of cluster just fading off into the distance in the end. And I think it came across really nicely, actually.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to talk about that end. So what happens is that for the organ place, and I'm right on this, I hope, correct me if I'm wrong, Alexis, but each pitch you conduct, and each pitch, so it's a kind of a clustery chord in a way, kind of an A flat major chord, and then you're conducting, and each pitch is eliminated, so the chord change. Can you talk a little bit why you did it that way? Because it is really neat and cool, and then we'll listen to it. The very end, so everything's cut off, and hear that chord in the organ, and you just conduct it, and each note is eliminated.
Yeah. With tuned water glasses, it's such a specific instrument, and the way you write for it has to be really, really specific. Some of the coolest sounds you can get from tuned water glasses are these clustery chords. And some of my favorite composers out there, they do a great deal with just the idea of simplicity and silence, right? Kind of begging the listener to lean in a little further to see is this what I'm hearing? And so I kind of liked the idea of making both audience and performer very vulnerable by just really stretching out that end as long as I could, almost to the point that it's uncomfortable. But just as it finally resolves to just that one low note, just kind of that release I wanted. And it was nice that I got to conduct it, because then I really just kind of got to milk it as much as I wanted or had envisaged in the first place. So that part was really fun for sure.
All right, let's take a listen to it. All right. Woo, great. All right. And our final movement is another Vespers responsori. So this one's probably the shortest out of the 7. So what was your idea on this movement and how you wanted to end the whole piece as a whole?
Yeah, well, with this one, of course, the text is certainly the shortest. The text is, Judah and Jerusalem, fear not, nor be dismayed. Tomorrow, go you forth, and the Lord, he will be with you. It's kind of a parting prayer, if you will. And that last line is repeated several times there. So it struck me as sort of meditative. I knew it should be very simple. Of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, Ryan wanted this work to be bookended by these 2 very simple a cappella movements. And our soloist Thomas Maloney did just a really nice job of the cantor with that chant as well. And so it's just supposed to be a nice, simple, sweet farewell, kind of a closing to just this night of magic and mystery, in anticipation of the big day, of course, which would be Christmas.
All right, let's listen to the final movement.
Judah and Jerusalem, fear not, nor be dismayed. Tomorrow we forth, and the Lord, he will be with you. Stand ye still, and ye shall see the salvation of the Lord. Tomorrow go ye forth, and the Lord, he will be with you. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Ghost. Tomorrow go ye forth, and the Lord, he will be with you.
Awesome. And that's how it ends. It ends very short and very sweet. And it's really gorgeous. Last question that I have before we open it up. What do you hope that as people hear in the future this piece of music, what do you hope that this piece accomplishes? So if anybody's listening potentially that might want to sing it with their choir, what do you hope that this piece accomplishes in a future Advent season for a future church or a community choir or college choir?
That's a really great question. I think I'll bring it back to just what the season of Advent really is. I think that for many people, the month of December, the end of November is kind of one of the craziest, most hectic, most stressful times of the year. And I think what's so beautiful about Vesper service or evensong or even just worship in general during the Advent season is it's a moment to be quiet, right? It's a moment to kind of rest your mind, to calm your spirit, and really just kind of focus on just the beautiful aspects of that time of waiting that I think we often just never take the time for during that month. And so, as we discussed, there are movements in this piece or moments in this piece that get very big or that kind of, get very clustery or agitated in parts, but it always kind of releases and relaxes And I would just love if this brought both singers and audiences just a sense of calm, which of course I think is even just really the point of that final movement. Is just sort of a parting prayer that no matter the chaos, right, there's peace to be found in this time and in this season. So yeah, I think that's what I would hope people would take away from it. Peace.
That's great, really. So I want to open it up for anybody to have questions about Alexis, anything. Does anybody have comments or questions?
Well, I have
Okay, yes. Let me get this. Hold on a second. Hold on. Get it here.
Alexis,
Hello.
I want to know whether or not you knew Don McFarlane. He's the music director, Don McFarlane, music director at Richardson Park Church.
I don't think I'm familiar with that name, actually.
Oh, you should meet him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's a great organist, choir director. Nice person to meet.
Yeah, I'll have to
Did
look
you?
him up.
Cool. All right. Awesome. Great. Do you want to ask the question that you had? Let me move the table here. Sorry about that loud noise, everybody. Go ahead.
I really enjoyed it. I'm Italian, and I enjoyed the Latin and all the other music. It's fantastic. Thank you very, very much.
She wanted to ask, what's the one question about, do you know the child's name? Remember you said, do you know what the baby's name is yet? Is what you asked me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What you gonna name your baby?
I do. I do know the name of the baby, but we are not revealing it until her birth, I'm afraid. The only thing we're sharing is that it starts with the letter R.
Rachel.
It's not Rachel. That is a beautiful name. But yeah. What was that?
You will have to let Brendan know when the baby's born and what the name is. So he can let us know.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
they definitely want when you revealed the name. I'll share it on your Facebook if you have it, and I'll say that's the name because we got some moms here that love to sell.
Yeah, it'll definitely be
yes.
on Facebook for sure.
Absolutely. All right.
April 4th.
I had one comment. I thought that really what really stood out for me in the hallmark of your trial, I could really see in the music how that you sang against the text, because it just repeated over and over again, particularly in the third, fifth, and final pieces. The real close fit between the text, the meaning of the word, and the chord structure, the sound, the emotion conveyed by the chord underneath it, and supported by, of course, the instrumentation. And it really, I write poetry too, and so, and I've been singing in choir since I was in 6th grade. But so I can feel it. It's just like a wave moving right through the music, and it's so in concert with the text that it really is, I think, the hallmark of your music, and that you can see the work you've done in what you produce, and it's beautiful. It really is.
Thank you so much. That is the highest compliment. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Alan, this is Alan, and he loves choral music. He is our choral guy, and he loves anything complicated choir music. And I said, this is a composer you want to hear. So you weren't disappointed, right, Alan?
Right.
All right.
Wonderful. A fellow choir nerd.
The last choir I sang in Houston was affiliated with the United Nations. They did a lot of their music. We sang all folk music in the original languages. So we'd sing maybe 16 different languages when we performed. And it was very rewarding to see the same emotions come through in different cultures. So in this way, we could act as an ambassador to different groups. So unfortunately, I can't sing here, but I also sang in a lot of church choirs. I was singing at Dalesford Abbey for 13 years there. So,
Oh, nice. Wonderful. Yeah, no, that's amazing. That sounds like you have some really amazing stories about those times. And you're right. It's amazing singing in different languages through the universal language of music, right? Absolutely.
The funniest thing, we had one Christmas season, I think it was, we had stayed in the practice room a little too long and doing the music. So when it came out, people had taken the normal pews that we would have sat in. And we said, oh. So they just had some empty chairs in front of the organ pipes in front of the big wall. And the huge organ pipes behind us. And when we sang there, all of a sudden he said, quiet down. Before, we're always trying to push to be heard, but we found out that there was a natural whispering chamber into the church there that they didn't know about. And we sat right on top of the speak. So all of a sudden it was broadcast very evenly throughout the whole thing without a PA system.
Interesting.
So that was unusual. All of a sudden we had to quiet down. So sometimes it makes a difference if you have that kind of acoustic reinforcement.
Oh yeah, it's one of the things that it makes me sad about sort of more modern church buildings is they kind of miss some of those, architectural things that kind of create these amazing acoustic possibilities for sure. Absolutely.
Japanese architect that did that, he designed it obviously in the building.
Right.
And then he forgot about it. But I appreciate that as a base because it's awfully hard to get heard.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the bass, we want to hear the bass. You're a foundation, right?
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Thank you, Alan.
Okay.
Thank you. So thank you so much, Alexis. It's really a pleasure. And we have thoroughly enjoyed your music. I knew they would enjoy you guys. Like when I heard that piece, I said, I got to book you for Friends Home. I think they're going to like this because we study music here for hours at Friends Home, all kinds of music. And it's like, what do you want? And we go from Johnny Cash to, like Frank Sinatra, Verdi's Requiem. We've even listened to hip hop music like Nicki Minaj. We do.
That's
and then
awesome.
we listen to like a whole bunch of music. It's really, really special.
I never took any lesson in school in music.
Say that one more time. Say that one more time.
Anything as far as education and music and lesson that. But being an Italian, I always wanted to sing. And I joined the choir in the church and they told me to move my lips, but don't let the voice out.
Oh no.
Because I'm out of town. So being that I was privileged to be living on a farm, I was going on the farm, far away from everybody, and I let my voice out.
Oh,
There was some people looking for me.
Now, do you want to say who you grew up with in Italy?
I grew up with Luciano Pavarotti.
did you?
From Modena.
Yeah.
And he was in the choir in the Duomo of Modena. And he was a little roly-poly, was younger, way younger, 10, 15 younger than I. And that little roly-poly singing like, oh, why can I have a voice like that? And he's my favorite. I like Luciano Pavarotti, Beniamino Gigli, all the Italian opera singers. And I just love that music.
Oh, that's
I like
so
music.
sweet. That's so
You
sweet.
love our Italian opera. She's my Italian coach. So if I don't say my Italian right, she'll tell me.
I actually found out I actually found out somewhat recently that I'm Italian. I'm adopted, and my family came to the United States. I think it was in the 50s from a really, really tiny town in Italy. So I've been learning about my own Italian heritage, which has been really, really fun.
Italian town.
Where's the Italian town?
Do you
Oh,
remember?
I don't remember off the top of my head. I'd have to look it up, but it's in central Italy, central east Italy, I think. It's a really tiny, tiny town. I'd have to find it. Maybe that'll be another thing I have to look up and text Brenton or something.
You can send me and I'll let Anna know.
Yeah, let me know, because I come from the province of Modena, like I said before.
Modena, yeah.
Vicino Pavarotti, Emilia Romagna, Modena, Bologna, and that area, not too far from Florence. But it's a pretty good sized city, Modena.
Yes,
Yeah, Ghirlandina.
yes, yeah.
I
Well,
have-
that's great.
I haven't been there yet, but it's on my bucket list. Gonna get myself to Italy someday.
Trying to know which part of Italy.
Yeah, so yeah, if you can let me know what part of Italy and I'll let you know.
Now I have a grandson, and he's my oldest grandson.
Say it one more time for the
My
camera.
grandson, he's a priest, and he's in Rome now.
Oh, wow.
His place, his mom and dad, they live in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Oh, wow.
And I used to live near Chicago, 100 miles west of Chicago. I used to live.
Okay. Wow.
And I have two children living over here in the area, and I have one son that lives in Omaha, Nebraska.
Very cool.
So we lived far away, but near, I'm here, but close to my daughter and my youngest son, which I have 5 grandchildren here, altogether 9 grandchildren, 2 great granddaughters.
That's
And I'm
wonderful.
proud of.
That's
I
wonderful.
miss them all. I miss them all, but every day there's a prayer, especially for them.
Loves all your that's
All
awesome.
my
That's
grandchildren.
awesome. Well, thank you,
I
Alexis.
come from a family that was number 10 out of 11.
Did you tell that? All right, tell that.
I come from a family of number 10, and number 10 I was, and we have 11 children, 7 girls and 4 boys. And
What's
it's
the-
only 3 of
What's the family name?
my family name. It was Cremonini.
Cremonini?
My maiden name is Cremonini, and I married to a Lusvardi. He's Italian. He was Italian too. Lusvardi, and he was number 1 out of 3 children, and he married the number 10 out of 11 children.
Yeah. My family, my Italian family that came to the States, I think they had about 10 children as well. They were the DeTulios.
The Tullios.
DeTulios, yep. And they had about 10 children too. I found out they were all musicians, which is really cool.
7 girls and 4 boys.
All right, so we're gonna wrap it up here. And thank you, Alexis. Let's give her one more hand. It's a pleasure. And I'm gonna end the recording. And that means I'd like you to stay. And thank you for watching. And
Thank you.
thank